Canada was supposed to be George Russell's response weekend, sprint win, Grand Prix pole. He had every chance to drag himself right back into the title fight. Instead, Montreal became the latest chapter in the rise of Kimi Antonelli. As always, when we talk F1 here on the Chris McPherson Show, we welcome in JR Carter. And JR, well, George Russell had it all until he didn't.
Had it all until he didn't, and then just behaved in a aggressive and dangerous manner immediately following the race. So, look, I'm genuinely here for the absolute collapse of George Russell's season. It was probably some of the best television I've seen all season so far.
When I saw it happen, I thought immediately JR will be just grinning with glee as this plays out. But you've alluded to it. We'll talk about what happened a little bit later on. As always, if you want to stay up to date with your F1 and your other sports, make sure to hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the channel. Let us know down in the comments below. Are you with JR or are you with George Russell as well? We'd love to know. But let's start, JR, I won't go all the way to the start of the weekend, but let's talk the sprint race. And you mentioned this just before off air. The sprint race was, and qualifying was probably much the same. We can probably package them in a little bit. It was very much to script, and it looked like it was going to be one of those very unexciting top teams finish top, next best teams finish in the pack after that, and the also-rans finish in the also-rans. The main race ended up a very different story, but it was Russell, Norris, Antonelli, Piastri in the sprint, and then same thing, just in a slightly different order. McLaren the front row, Mercedes the front row, McLaren the second row in qualifying. The Red Bulls were there, the Ferraris were there as well, and there's your top 8 in qualifying, and essentially your top 8 as well, barring Arvin Lindblad popping his head in the sprint results.
That's right. And look, it was a very similar sort of look in both qualifying sessions too, where the sprint quali grid versus the actual race grid, there wasn't a lot of actual differences between them. Just sort of where the Red Bulls had sort of placed themselves between, like in the main race, the Red Bulls put themselves between the Ferraris. Otherwise, it was like a Merc 1-2, McLaren 3-4, then Ferrari 4-5-6 for the sprint, then just slightly different order for the main race.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And when you start to unpack that, there's some interesting things that do come out of it, though, right? Like it is that the Mercedes are still, even after the upgrades, they are the best team. They've got a good problem, but it's still a problem. We saw that start to build out in the main race, which we'll get into. It's this, Hamilton-Rosberg dynamic, Mark II.
It sort of is, isn't it? Like where Kimi in the sprint and in the race this morning has been very, very aggressive and very keen to get that front row. George Russell, like in all honesty, like he drove very well defensively. Like for him to hold Kimi off the way he did for the amount of time that he did, but at the same time, Kimi just got that drive. Although I did have to laugh a little bit during the sprint race. Toto appeared on the radio, and that when Toto appears, things have not gone well for you as a driver.
Yeah, as if Toto's getting involved, and I did hear some commentary on the race about the fact that I believe that Toto and the two drivers and their partners all flew over on Toto's private jet, and they were questioning whether or not they were all returning home, or whether if you're George and Kimi, you might just opt for flying commercial on the way back home just to avoid having to have the awkward conversations at 36,000 feet.
Look, I think that if Drive to Survive wants to be this like all-encompassing sort of thing, they need to get themselves on that plane.
Yeah, that would be some scenes, certainly. I guess in terms of the qualifying, Arvid Lindblad in the qualifying the sprint race was probably the standout outside of the main pack for me. Finished in the points in the top 8 in the sprint race, finished 9th in qualifying. We'll get to him in a moment in the race. It didn't quite pan out, but that shows some promise. And, there's some people that were talking at the start of the year that he's absolutely ready to take this bull by the horns, pardon the pun on the racing bulls. But he's starting to show that a bit more consistently, which is positive, as is Franco Colapinto, who got into the top 10. And, he seems to be incrementally improving race on race.
Yeah, Franco's now starting to get a hold of that Alpine now. Like the change to the Mercedes engines, we've been saying it sort of all season, where that has been just one big positive change for Alpine, where they're now more like the Renault of old, where like they're part of the equation. They're not sort of a major part, but they are like they're present is the way to sort of describe it, as opposed to the last couple of seasons where they have just been the back marker that just needs to get out of the way.
Yeah, I guess I touched on that upgrade package before for Mercedes as well. It probably wasn't, I guess, as comprehended by many because, Mercedes have been at the front essentially the whole season, but the gap is there. McLaren in that qualifying, they were there, but not quite. Like, it didn't look like they're realistically, anyone's threatening that front row of the grid when it comes to this, one lap time.
That's right. It's a different story, sort of off the grid, but yeah, like in terms of just overall times, those Mercedes are kind of unbeatable right now. Hardly anything between that sort of started that couple of top 5 starters though. Like we're only looking at 0.3 of a second across them, so like the competition's there. It's just a matter of like someone's just got to get in front of those Mercedes and stay in front at this point.
Yeah, I think that's the big question, though, isn't it? It's just a matter of doing so, and once someone does it, maybe the others, what do they say? If you can see it, you can believe it. So maybe once someone does it, then they'll be like, okay, actually, we can race them here a little bit, but we'll wait and see. Let's transition on to the main race earlier this morning. Let's start with the obvious piece. That racing across the first period of the race between George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, that is what I want to see in F1. I want to see teammates going pretty balls to the wall. They touched tyres at one point, which, as you touched on, kind of saw Toto getting into Bono, and everyone was told to just calm it a beat. But drivers are allowed to race against their teammates when they are by far the 2 best cars, and at the moment, the 2 best drivers in the 2 best cars in terms of consistent performance. Yeah,
well, that was Toto's second appearance on the radio over the weekend, because the one I was alluding to was actually in the sprint race. That Toto again didn't directly talk to Kimi. I didn't see on the broadcast, but spoke to Bono and said, "Hey Bono, calm these guys down." That said, though, it was great racing. Sort of a little bit loose in places as well. There was that one sort of critical incident where they did come together. Kimi got moved off the track and then had to give a position back, which he was not impressed about. So, any other time, they'd be screaming for a penalty to the other team. What can they do in this situation? It's them versus them.
Yeah, it was entertaining. Some of the radio chat was entertaining, and we'll talk Ferrari in a little bit, and we'll talk about one of their drivers in his radio chat. But I guess on the Antonelli point, at how long do we still, look at him as the kid? This guy's now won 4 Grand Prix in a row. He's the first driver in F1 history to go from winning their first Grand Prix and then make it 4 on the trot for to get their first 4 wins. He's also the first Italian, which when you think about how woven the Italian culture is into F1, since Alberto Ascari in 1952. That's 74 years to win 4 straight, which I found quite phenomenal. At some point, the story stops being, can Antonelli handle the pressure? And, look at this young wonder kid. And it starts to become, can anyone put pressure on him? And he is the man with the target on his back.
That's right. So is it starting to become maybe George will be a little more comfortable at Williams next season? Is that where we're at as well?
Well, that's going to be a question, obviously, as the chairs start becoming musical and, they work out where they're going and what's going to land in what position in terms of seats for 2027. It's always going to be a discussion point. But, it's interesting, that composure after the frustration of the sprint race. He could have quite easily, as a young guy, just still had that in the back of his head and been a little more reckless. In some of those challenges, he took it right to the line, and he just kept putting the pressure on George when he was chasing him. In terms of that race pace behind him, we saw him lock up a couple of times at the hairpin, George Russell, just because he had that pressure. And then, on that George Russell piece, we moved from Kimi Antonelli, the heartbreak for George Russell. And, I know you'll have absolutely no sympathy nor be getting your violin out to play it for George. But the race was on, and I actually wanted to see it finish out, and I wanted to see Kimi win, fair and square. But, failure again for the power unit for this time for Russell. And we talked about this earlier in the year when it happened to the McLarens, because we talked about the Mercedes power unit and would this come to haunt them. And it has in this case. And that opened the door for Kimi just to go on a bit of a Sunday stroll after that.
Yeah, after that, sort of Kimi's victory sort of it was assured. George did behave sort of poorly and throwing his headrest out. That wasn't really called for, and he has been fined €5,000 for doing so now. Suspended, assuming it doesn't ever happen again.
Suspended. I was going to say, I'm sure he'll struggle to rake up $5,000 from down the back of €5,000 from the back of his couch.
I know, right? But yeah, it was just anger and frustration sort of pouring out. I mean, you get it, but at the same time, this is the sort of thing that he's been giving Max shit about all season as well. So, not all season, all decade, I should say.
What they say, JR, people in glass houses, and he strikes me very much as someone who'd live in a glass house.
Absolutely, he does. But yeah, so from there though, we got a bit more interesting racing sort of in the other podium places, because obviously. The McLarens at this point had their no good bad day had already occurred. where like Lando pretty much had been taken out of the race, and Oscar, like we probably haven't touched on that. It's just McLaren's absolute strategy blunder off the start of this race as well, leaving the guys on the intermediate tyres.
Well, let's talk about that. As you said, starting on the intermediates, then having to make an early pit stop. Oscar ended up back in the pits because he decided he wanted to T-bone another car and push them out of the race. So he ended up back in the pits getting his front wing fixed, which then led to him taking a 10-second penalty later as well, which ended up keeping him out of the points. But, yeah, very poor tactical blunder. There was talk of some rain about. They thought it was going to come late. But realistically, again, they took a huge gamble, and in classic McLaren fashion, it didn't pay off. And then on top of that, when Lando managed to, turn it into something and start to push his way back through, then his car proverbially shut the bed.
That's right. Like, yeah, they sort of pitted him an extra time for a reliability issue, so something was going on with the side pods, and then they just brought him back in the end, and like it was over. He actually probably was the most polite way Lando could have wrapped up his race, because he made it to the off road and just turned it around behind the wall, just parked it up. No fanfare, no safety car.
Very casual, very resigned to his fate. Like, I'm trying to think who it was, because there was another car there in that same spot, and he just went and pulled in behind him like he's parking at the shopping centre, and just okay.
I thought it was just like a steward's car, to be honest. Like it didn't look like a race car to me.
Oh, wasn't it? I thought at a glance, and again, I spoke to you before. I kind of watched this on a bit of a gap of delay at the end, and when I was watching that on a slight eye to it, either way, it was very casual. As I said, it very much was, irrespective of who he's parking behind. It was the sort of parking that you might see, your parents doing when they drive to the shops and get out. Like, it was just very right, yep, we're here, we're out, let's go and do what we need to do. But I guess if you're giving out grades on this, that's got to be an F, right? 3rd and 4th in qualifying, 0 points, 1 finisher in 11th.
Yeah, look, it's starting to become a problem. Like, McLaren season, like, they're cooked at this stage. Like, there's probably no real comeback at this point. Like, we're now getting deep in the season. We're getting into the European races now as well. So, like we're going to see a lot more racing compared to what we've sort of seen. But Kimi and Mercedes has just put themselves in that dominant position. Like we were talking, like, were they going to sort of be able to extend a lead out? They certainly have. Like, anything that happens now, like it's Mercedes' championship to lose.
Yeah, it certainly is. And we'll talk about the standings in a moment. I guess the next piece to talk about there is Arvin Lindblad, and we talked about how well he did in the sprint race, how well he did in qualifying, and that was it. We ended up losing 2 laps of the race because of him, because his car wouldn't go into gear. Yeah,
that's right. We had that very delayed start where poor old Crofty and Martin, like, they're sort of halfway through their sentence, and we're just holding. Oh, start's been another formation lap, and they ended up having to do the 2 formation laps just to get him off the grid. But yeah, it's unfortunate. Like, he had like a great qualifying, like, sort of, and he's really coming to terms with that car. Like, he is definitely a driver for the future now. But yeah, just, again, reliability issues have been something that sort of crept up this season. I did notice we had 22 starters for the sprint race, actually. That's another thing. Like, I think it might be the first time we've had, like, 22 people actually start a race properly.
Yeah, it feels like the reliability issues, and, I think it's no coincidence this has occurred with the new regulations, the new power units and everything else, that a lot of these things have been impacted. But, I mean, we could wax lyrically about that as well. What I want to do is try and focus on a couple more of the positives, and one of those is Ferrari's performance in this race. Charles Leclerc, I don't think he'll be putting his race engineer on his Christmas card list anytime soon. There was some very terse exchanges about how and when they communicate, and he basically said, I think with probably 20 laps to go or so, or maybe a little bit less, basically said, shut your mouth, and unless there's something on fire, I don't want to hear from you.
And look, rightly so. Those Ferrari race engineers are their own worst enemies most of the time. Like, some of the information, like, that they've conveyed, or the way they communicate, like, I just don't know I don't know where they're finding these guys. In all honesty, like, how have they got these jobs? Because they seem to just irritate their drivers to no end. At the same time, like, they're constantly giving conflicting information.
Yeah, it's a bit bizarre, but I think a little more friendly on the other side of the garage this time around is Lewis Hamilton finished 2nd, his best regular Grand Prix result for Ferrari. A good, like, it looked like he was battling a little bit at one point there, but he came back, fought back, and did a really strong overtake against Verstappen late in the race on the outside at turn 1, which saw him get that spot of 2nd from Max Verstappen, which I think that's a big check tick box for Ferrari, 2nd and 4th overall. Pretty solid Grand Prix, despite the other results. You take those when you get them.
Absolutely, like Lewis will absolutely take that. Like that's his best result, like since being in that Ferrari car, just in general, not just for the season. Like, yeah, he's had some sprint success in it, but in a main race, 2nd step of the podium, really great result. Good to see Lewis and Max doing a little bit of racing again. Like that's sort of the racing we were there for. Didn't end up really being anything. Like there wasn't much between them at the end, but like it wasn't that big a battle. Like it was just like it sort of just happened, and then they just got on with it. But like the other thing was Max on the podium for the first time of the season as well. Like where a lot of just joy on that podium, where everyone seemed to be just having a good time.
Yeah, everyone was having a good time while George Russell was out the back kicking some stones and throwing steering wheels. But yeah, you touched on Red Bull. Red Bull still, look, to be fair, they don't look like the team to beat, but Max got onto the podium in a very difficult weekend, which, is very on brand for Max Verstappen.
That's right, yeah. Like just there. Hey, I'm still around. Like I'm not going anywhere.
No, exactly right. Well, the takeaways from the race, I think, we talked about Mercedes, the clear team to beat. They lead the Constructors' Championship. They're on 219 points. Ferrari 2nd now on 147. That is a monstrous gap. And barring, someone doing something disastrous to the Mercedes factory and all of their team, I don't see that getting reeled in at any point. They've got one hand on that title, probably 1.5 hands on the Constructors' Championship already.
That Constructors' Championship, absolutely. Drivers' Championship, if Kimi can get it this season, I think it's going to, it will spell the end of George Russell's career, in all honesty. Like it's that simple. Like he's been heir apparent there at Mercedes for all those years, and then bang, his teammate just starts dominating.
Well, we talked before about that generation next we've spoken about in terms of that, and the rookies and the young guns. That's another piece in that, right? Like if we're in a different era where George was, one of the guys in the age bracket that he is, and there wasn't as many young guns pushing through, and there's a lot of older drivers aging out. But realistically, the only person that's aging out of F1 anytime soon is Fernando Alonso, and even he doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon, but unless he decides he wants to. So it's not like there's lots of other opportunities at reasonably competitive cars. And you talked about it before. It means that if George does get shifted out and it's clear that Kimi's the number one, well, that means that George lands somewhere, like a Williams, maybe an Audi if he's really fortunate and a few deck chairs move the right way for him. But it's not going to be somewhere. He's not going to Ferrari or Red Bull.
No, that's the thing. He won't get anywhere near those sort of two teams. A return to Williams sort of see his career out, maybe. But that depends on where's Albon and Sainz aren't exactly destroying that car. Poor old Albon got knocked out, but it's they're not going anywhere. Like that, Williams is happy with their driving fair. So George is going himself into a little bit of strife here. He needs to find some form.
He certainly does. There's a bit of tension in that garage. Kimi Antonelli now 43 points clear. And interestingly enough, because of the results this weekend, Charles Leclerc 13 points, Lewis Hamilton 16 points behind George Russell. So any more issues, and he could very much find himself fighting on a rearguard action to try and defend behind him versus chasing in front of him. 4 wins on the bounce. He's absolutely killing it, Kimi. I think based on consistency and performance after this weekend, you have to say that Ferrari, they're now the second best team on the grid.
They certainly are. I think, and they've been showing that the whole season. Their start pace has been sensational compared to the Mercedes start pace. They just need to just get some longevity going, and they'll start winning races.
They certainly do. In terms of the last takeaway for me, we mentioned it before, the rookies and the young guns. Antonelli, obviously, he's a rookie by age, but not by behaviour and driving. But Hadjar 5th, Colapinto 6th, Lawson 7th, and I know you've probably got some views on that. Ollie Bierman in the top 10 again, holding off Oscar Piastri. Lindblad scoring in the sprint race despite his start to the main race. Canada had a bit of a next-gen feel about it, I think, JR.
It really did. The big question is, during the pit stop, did they just black out the cameras and Lindblad jump in Lawson's car and he was actually driving it for the rest of the race? Because to see Liam Lawson in the top 10 legitimately just doesn't make sense.
He somehow just managed to stay out of trouble for a change, which is unheard of. He didn't pick any fights. He didn't flip anyone off. He didn't drive into any walls. F1's easy when you just stay away from everyone else.
Yeah, if you do, if you just follow the basic traffic sense, you're okay.
Yeah, the only thing that could have been more on brand for this race is if Liam Lawson got hit by George Russell's flying steering wheel. Anyway, that would have been entertaining, and I think this fine might have been more than €5,000 at that point.
That may have been a 3-week holiday.
Yeah. Again, I'd be about seeing something like that. It'd be. I don't want to see any harm come to anyone, but it could be very interesting. But the good news is, JR, we've got 2 weeks now till one of my favourite races of the year, and with the new regulations and the size of cars, we might actually see some overtaking in Monaco.
We may very well. Like we're finally going to be like we get the real litmus test of these new regulations, because the new regulations were put in place to sort of prevent things like what had been happening at Monaco from happening. So we're going to see if like this will be the real test as their success.
It certainly will. As you touched on before, we have a race every second week for the next 6 weeks, and then we're into a congested period in July where we've got 3 races in that month. And then we're going to break in August. But essentially, in about an 8 to 9 week period, I think we've got somewhere in the realm of 6 races. So it's going to be good. It's going to be busy. We're going to be talking lots of F1, JR. As always, a huge thank you to you for coming on and debriefing us and breaking down Canada.
No worries at all.
And as always, when you're tuning in, make sure to hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the channel so you can stay updated with all of our F1 and other content. Because Canada didn't just give us a winner, it gave us the shape of the season. Mercedes out front, Antonelli rising, Russell chasing, Ferrari starting to circle, McLaren definitely wobbling, and Max Verstappen still refusing to disappear out of those wing mirrors. Until next time, a huge thanks for tuning into your home of the Black and White of Sports. No great opinions.